We must resume the hunt.
So, as I've covered in the previous slice, the game is fun, visually interesting and packed with unique mechanics and diversity. Why then isn't it more widely known? Why does it sit at just 77 positive reviews on Steam? What's with all the frustration and the negative reviews? As much as Chaos Gate Daemonhunters shines in its visual style and tactical precision, it has some clear drawbacks, and it's time to talk about them. Let's start with something small but ever present, the UI. Overall, it's clunky and not very intuitive. HP bars, for example, are just small green lines with no actual numbers. You have to hover over a unit to see their actual HP. This kind of design is everywhere, and it adds unnecessary friction to the experience. Then there's the issue of descriptions, or lack thereof. Many abilities have vague or incomplete explanations. Afflict Silenced sounds useful, but what does silence actually do? Good question. This is particularly bad as the game is packed with status effects and afflictions, some of which sound way too similar. Stunned and incapacitated, pinned and hobbled, purge and purify. It is so frustrating because Daemonhunters actually has an in-game encyclopedia with all this information. It is just hidden. You have to dig through the settings menu to even realize it exists. Otherwise, it's trial and error. Now for one of my biggest gripes, the pacing. Nearly every in-game action is followed by an unskippable close-up animation. It's cool the first few times, seeing your squad up close, feeling the impact, but after hundreds of times, it's just tiresome. And while there's an option to speed up enemy turns, there's nothing to speed up your own units or skip these constant animations. Why? Did the machine spirit personally forbid it? Did no one on the dev team play for more than a few hours and think, hey, maybe this gets annoying? On a typical mission, I'd say at least a third of the time is spent not playing, just watching. It's a pace killer, and it drags the whole experience down. This slowness only deepens by the game's repetitiveness. Once you've mastered the mechanics, learned the enemy types, and built a solid squad, the gameplay can start to feel like a slog. There's less surprise, less tension. And then there are the missions that are just not that fun. Something about their design just doesn't click. I wouldn't say I hated any of the missions in the vanilla game, but every now and then you get one that just isn't as engaging, and you find yourself hoping it ends as quickly as possible. This brings me to the core issue most players seem to have: frustration. Many players find the game overly punishing, grim and difficult. It's full of mechanics that feel anti-fun, like the ones I've just described. But is it really as bad as it seems? Let's dig deeper. First, there's the choice system. Throughout the game, you'll be presented with dilemmas, disputes between factions, strategic decisions, unforeseen crises. The problem is that the choices are usually between bad and bad. No matter what you pick, the outcome is negative. Sometimes there's a trade-off, like gaining construction speed, but losing research efficiency. But more often than not, it just feels like you're picking the least painful punishment. You can't roleplay or make choices that feel right. It turns decision-making into damage control rather than something meaningful. The world map adds to this tension. When new missions appear, you'll never be able to complete them all. At best, you'll manage 2 out of 3, often just 1. If you're in a bad spot, you might be forced to skip everything. And when you don't complete a mission, the plague spreads, making future battles harder. This creates a snowball effect. A few failures can spiral into more failures, as the enemy grows stronger while you don't. And eventually, there's a total campaign loss.
Only in death does duty end, Inquisitor. Can we...
Oh, it ends. The bloom flowers. The galaxy infected by plague. I have failed. We have all failed. And Nurgle claims his tally.
May the Emperor forgive us. We have tarnished the chapter with our failure.
One of the DLCs makes this even worse, introducing tougher missions way too early. But again, I'll save the discussion for the DLC section. On the battlefield, the game is just as ruthless. Enemies are numerous, strong and relentless. They patrol the map, call in reinforcements and hit hard.
Eat this!
To make things worse, there's the warp surge system. Depending on the planet's infection level, the warp surge meter fills each turn. Faster if you use psychic abilities. When it maxes out, a random negative effect triggers. Warp surges can range from mildly annoying to downright brutal, giving enemies free armor and disabling key abilities. You're essentially punished for playing the game, using abilities and ending your turn. And this is where the main point lies. You see, the game isn't just doing this for the sake of it. It actively punishes defensive turtling, pushing you toward a specific playstyle. Aggressive, fast and decisive. The game wants you to charge headfirst into enemy lines, smash through Overwatch and crush your foes like the heretic bugs they are. Sure, you'll take casualties, but that's the price of serving the Emperor.
Shall not fail.
What supports this aggressive playstyle as intentional design choice is the way Grey Knights handle death, or rather, the lack of it. At least not immediately. Each Grey Knight has a pool of resilience points. When a knight hits 0 HP in combat, they become critically injured and are out of action for 3 turns. Back at the base, they lose 1 resilience point as part of their recovery. Interestingly, if you have a special facility build, surviving a critical injury also grants the knight an augmentation, a permanent buff. So, charging headfirst and letting your knights get critically injured isn't just manageable, it can actually be beneficial. However, if a knight reaches 0 resilience, they die for good. This system already encourages a bolder playstyle, but the real game changer is action point refresh. Whenever you encounter a new group of enemies, your squad gets a full AP refresh and an automatic reload. The same happens when you wipe out all active enemies. The implications of this mechanic are massive. You can spend all your AP taking actions, trigger an enemy pod with your last move, get a full refresh, wipe them out, refresh again and keep going. In some cases, you can even chain multiple pods together, racking up 50 plus actions in what's technically a single turn. During this time, warp surges don't occur, enemies don't get a chance to act, and mission timers stay frozen. This is critical information. Understanding and exploiting this mechanic is essential. It defines combat.
The fiends have been put down.
There's even more. If you execute a stunned enemy with precise targeting, every Grey Knight in your squad gains 1 AP. This stacks with action point refresh, letting you extend turns even further. The faster and more aggressive you are, the more you benefit from these mechanics. It rewards bold, high-risk tactics, pushing you to take calculated risks instead of turtling in the corner. On top of all that, often you can and should just rush objectives. It might feel weird, but the most optimal strategy usually is to just ignore enemies and destroy the objective. You're not here to banish every single demon. That can be done. You're here for a purpose, and that should be your primary focus. Most missions end the moment you complete the objective, no matter how many enemies are left. At times, I just ran compositions that had a single damage dealer that everyone buffed, and they just killed the objective.
Get down!
Job well done, Commander.
Even boss fights can be approached this way. Why bother engaging with their gimmicks when you can just buff a single powerhouse unit, give them extra AP and melt the boss in 2 turns? It's a little cheap, but it's also undeniably cool to see a super soldier tear through everything in its path. I also suspect this is a side effect of playing on normal difficulty. On higher difficulties, I imagine you'd need 3 turns instead of 2. Or maybe even be forced to engage with the boss gimmicks. So yeah, while the game has its fair share of punishing and frustrating mechanics, I think the core issue many players have is that they don't get it. They come in expecting an XCOM reskin, playing cautiously, turtling up, avoiding all damage. And then they get frustrated when that approach doesn't work. This isn't XCOM. It's designed around aggression, momentum and seizing control of the battlefield before the enemy even gets a turn. So when people complain about the game being unfair, I don't think that's really the issue. At its core, Daemonhunters isn't frustrating, it's demanding. It demands that you learn its systems, pay attention to its mechanics, and use them to your advantage. If you do, it's an incredibly rewarding experience. If you don't, well, you're in for a rough time. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video. In the next slice, I'll be covering the story and world building.
Humanity's blade against the demon. For him, the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
So, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you'd like to support the channel, consider subscribing, leaving a like or dropping a comment. It really helps a lot. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.
Good. That will do for now.